Hello, and welcome to Sound Talking, Sound Thinking Fireside Edition, brought to you by Yamaha Synthesizers. My name is Scott Brackett. I am a musician, and I make videos about synthesizers, gear, and creative process. And today, I'm excited to talk to you about a sound pack that I put together for Yamaha. Using their MODX keyboard, I loaded on custom samples and used combinations of those samples that I recorded myself with some of the stock sounds from both the sample-based engine and the FMX engine, and combined that with certain arpeggios that I wrote myself, either by playing live into the MIDI recorder or using hardware sequencers, and different sort of modulation and control schemes. So without further ado, let's go do some stuff, and I'll show you what I mean. So first up is Driftwood. You can hear there are chords and sort of a chugging palm mute kind of a thing. And I'm playing octaves because that's kind of tends to be the best results, but you can do sort of a chord and do more like an arpeggiated kind of a thing. And then you can hear in the background there are chords. If you play all non-sharps, it's going to sound right. There's the lead. And with the super knob, I've got some bit crush, just a little bit. And if we switch scenes, we can bring in some drums. Next, on this other scene, I've got some mixing information stored so that the filter comes down on the drums and just creates a little more space up high for this section. But still keeps that rhythmic element going. And if we go to the next section, let's see, I think the drums drop out in scene 5. Oh no, that's right. A chimey thing will happen with my right hand. So I can play a lead on the right hand, but there's also sort of an electric piano chime that happens. So this next patch is assembled from several instances of a rhythmic patch that I created using just different found sounds, basically. So let me show you what one instance of that sounds like. And they're kind of grouped. Some speak and spell type stuff. There's some printer stuff. And just some sort of clicks and clocks and that kind of thing. So all of those have been loaded into different tracks within the patch and have arpeggios running. Let me just go ahead and reset the patch. And yeah, so when you play, there also is a bass and a pad and a lead sound that comes in. So let's see what that's like. So as you can hear, if I hold down my right hand, there's a pad and a lead that happens. And you probably just heard the tape stop, which kicks in. Let me turn the motion sequencing on the super knob off, but that happens at full volume. Or the highest value of the super knob. And I've got some motion sequencing on the super knob itself. And for the assignable switches, number 1 turns on sort of a beat repeat. And the mod wheel controls some of that interaction as well. And with the super knob, there's a bunch of things happening. The tape stop is getting turned on, and the filter stuff changes a lot, primarily for the rhythmic patches. Next up is a patch called Worms and Bugs. And this one starts out a little more sort of atmospheric. And there's the bugs. A little cricket chirp in the delay there. And you can see as I turn the super knob, it changes the delay. And when I hit assignable switch number 2, it turns the delay time, the actual chunk of audio being repeated, way down, and then you can hear it kind of squeak all the way up. Alright, so let's bring in the next pattern. Assignable switch 1 locks some of the sounds from the right hand side into the delay, so it turns the delay feedback up all the way. And there's a little bit crush there with the mod wheel. And now with the right hand, instead of that sort of more percussive sound, we've just got a pad over here. Okay, and next up is Portable Rain, another sort of more atmospheric one to start with. And with this one, typically I tend to do the pad grouped with my right hand, but in this one I went ahead and did it with the bass. So you've got a monophonic bass, but if you hold it down you get kind of a wobbly pad sound. With this one, there's that rhythmic patch from the Monday's performance, but it doesn't have an arpeggio on it. What it actually has is just an envelope follower that's listening to this polyphonic synth sound on the right hand. And some of the motion sequencing lanes are doing changing the harmonics of the patch as we go. And assignable switch 1, as you probably heard, changes octave of some of the elements. And mod changes the cutoff frequency and the resonance amount for the noise track. So let's go ahead and bring in some drums. And that pad on the left hand just kind of encourages me to do a little bit more than just root notes with my left hand. Because as I play, it sort of builds these chords. And next we have pips and pops. The only difference between this patch and most of my other patches is that the rhythm elements are actually broken out into their own tracks, and I'm using a dedicated FMX instrument for the first 4 parts to do all the rhythmic elements. So track 1 is a kick, track 2 is another kick, but with some pitch mod so you can do tom fills with it. And then track 3 is a quote-unquote snare. It's got a little ring to it. And track 4 is it's a bunch of little sort of percussive things. Let's go ahead and do the full pattern here. And we've got a lead on the right hand and a pad if I hold it down. And some beat repeat with the super knob once I put it into the mid position there. And we can use the mod wheel to do some of those tom fills with one of the kicks, or we can leave it down and just keep it a kick. And next we have a patch called AM Radio. So here again you'll see left hand is a bass-ish thing, and right hand is a lead. You can also hear bursts of radio static that I recorded from shortwave radio interspersed, in addition to some of the sound effects from the stock sounds on the board. And there's an envelope follower hooked to the right hand, so it controls whether or not that radio static is triggered or not. But there's some randomness to it as to whether or not it'll actually trigger. Let's see. And pattern 2 brings in the drums. There's a polyphonic lead kind of sound and a monophonic arpeggiated figure. 1 brings in some chorus on the bass and does some filtering on the arpeggiated lead. Do a sweet tom fill. And Assignable Switch 2 does kind of a filtery auto filter thing that kind of makes the whole drum track sound like a synth tom. Oh, and another thing I meant to bring up earlier is that a lot of times the pitch bend will only apply to certain elements in the patch. And as you can hear, the right-hand part and the drums are affected by the pitch, but not the bass part. And I like having drums in pitch bend a lot too. It's real fun. Can make a nice little, pseudo break for the drums. So with this one, I wanted to do something fun that was based on early video game sound synthesis. So this one is called Bag of Chips, and it is several sort of chiptunes oriented voices. And I'm using the super knob to flip back and forth between them. As you can see, it's moving pretty fast. So as you can see, there's several different things happening here, and a lot of the most audible changes are coming from the super knob. So you can hear it kind of sweeping through. And those are all FM synthesis sounds. The only sample-based stuff is the rhythm track. And let's see here, we've got a couple of things happening on the assignable switches, mostly to do with just sort of effects mixes. Turn the amps back on. And up next, we've got VHYes. And mostly this one's just kind of a lot of pads, really. But it's got some drums going on, and there's some tape effects that are used to change the pitch semi-randomly. Let me show you how this works. And some saturation changes as well. And if you can hear that sort of rhythmic pulsing for the right hand part, that is the motion sequencing lane, sort of changing the operator's levels on that patch. And let's go through some of these others here. And the assignable switches do some changes to the effects on the drums and whether or not the part that's played with the right hand is polyphonic or monophonic. So patch number 9, Hypercube, marks the transition into sort of more single-purpose patches that are not kind of so kitchen sink-ish. Basically less arpeggiating stuff and more just kind of textures that you can use for songs. But this one, as a transitional thing, is loaded with arpeggios, but no drums or anything like that. So let's give this a listen. And it's sort of a pseudo-random arpeggiation that's happening a lot on the left hand here. And you can use the mod wheel to bring in the bass part, which is running, I believe it's running at half speed of whatever arpeggio is happening on the higher part. Which in that case didn't sound great, but let's try that again. Assignable switch does some bit crush. And assignable switch 1 brings in a secondary part with the right hand. And the mod wheel, in addition to controlling the balance between the left hand parts, the bass and the higher part that's happening on the left, it also controls the delay feedback and delay time for the additional right hand part. But pretty much just right at the top of its travel. Yeah. It's really hard to express just how deep you can go with the modulation and control in this synthesizer. By way of trying to do so, let me just show you that, for example, with the patch setup that I was just talking about, this is how the knob responds when you turn it for the sample rate. And I believe that's, let's see here, that's super knob. So as you can see, there is this patch, a rather sequence loaded for the curve there. And typically when you turn a knob, you would expect it to go from its lowest value to its highest value. But instead, when you turn this knob from the 0 to, say, 127th value, as it's moving between those, it's giving you whatever value is in this box on that curve at that particular time. So the left-hand side is when the knob is at 0, and the right-hand side is when the knob is at 127. And as you move through, instead of going from one low value to a high value, it's jumping up and down based on where this curve is drawn. And it's not super obvious with that, but let's take, for example, the arpeggiating sound. You can see that on this knob, basically anywhere below like 95% up on the mod wheel, it's going to be a negative value. But right as it approaches the top of that little chart there, which corresponds to the top value of this modulation wheel, right when it gets to that spot, it's going to jump up really fast. And you can hear that. And then the delay time is going to do the opposite. So it's going to be a relatively long delay time until we get to the very end, and then it's going to make it shorter, which is going to make that kind of pseudo grain synthesis. You just grab this one little bit and trap it in there. All of the controls, you can map them to a specific thing, but that's nothing new. What's really new is that you can change how the knob actually responds. And the really crazy thing is when you start doing that, you reach this point where you have multiple controls for multiple patches superimposed on top of each other, all following their own curve. And that allows you to turn one knob and change a bunch of stuff all at once in really interesting ways. Okay, and for the remaining patches, there's no more rhythmic elements, just sort of atmospheric stuff, but plenty of control schemes that are pretty fun. Let's take a look at this one here. So I'm using a beat repeat to kind of trap a glitchy version of the notes as I play them. And the super knob is changing operator levels to change the harmonica content. And let's see. Yeah, and then assignable switches 1 and 2. Change the wet-dry amounts for certain effects. So just to sort of break out an example of the detailed level of control that you can assign to the different switches, I'm going to show you sort of how the Galaxian patch works, which is a arpeggiating part on the left hand with a bass, and on the right hand a lead sort of portamento. And with this particular one, you know, it's pretty common to have mod wheel change the pitch modulation. But what's interesting is I also have for the mod wheel the filter changing on the bass part. And because of the way you're able to customize what the knobs do, you can change it so that the mod wheel does both things. So as I turn the mod wheel up, it turns resonance up and cutoff down. So when the knob is at the low position, cutoff is the filter is completely open, and then as I turn the mod wheel up, the filter closes down, the low pass filter cutoff frequency goes down, and resonance goes up, and simultaneously the normal thing that happens when you hit a mod wheel, the pitch starts to wobble on this right hand part. And with that, let me go to part 3. With that one, I've got it set to the dogleg curve, and basically what it means is that as I go turning the knob up, once it gets to about 75 or 80% up, it hits its full value, and then if I move past that, it goes back down again. And in addition to allowing me to kind of work the filter in a more musical way, so I can have this part where I'm just sort of playing a pretty traditional lead, and I can do the modulation change and then move past that. And you can probably hear, but another thing that I've got going on is the reverb send is right at the very last bit of the, probably like, 7% of the knob turn. So I'm changing the filter here. So just that little tiny sort of customization that you can do with these controls is pretty amazing in my opinion. Next we have Dimension 44B, and this one is a nice wobbly pad sound. It's a little bit of not so nice bit crush. And octave jump with the assignable switch number 1. And if you turn up the knob, there is a sample that I took from a self-playing Krell patch from another synthesizer. And it just loops, giving you a, semi-random kind of a thing. And if you wanted that to be automated, you can switch on the motion sequencing, and I've got a nice slow sine wave with some random timing play effects on the super knob. So the super knob will change its timing a little bit every time it completes the cycle of the automation lane there. And as you can hear, there's a feedback amount on the delay as well that gets cranked when you turn the mod wheel up. So we sort of trap that sound in there, and you can release it. So this patch does have an arpeggio, but it's really just a single note played for 83 measures or something like that. And then that just loops. So you just hit a note, and that toggles it. And now it's switching between these four actually, samples of a self-playing patch that I put together on a different synthesizer, a modular synthesizer. And basically it'll keep doing that, and the super knob is kind of switching between them at sort of a random speeds. The values are always, no, actually the values are random as well. So it creates kind of an interesting bed of sounds that it's going to be a little different every time. And if you want to just let it do that, you can. And Mod Wheel does reverb amount. If you would like to play along, you can use the assignable switches to bring in different voices. So there's the assignable switch 1, which is a FM synth sound. And it also has different random modulations that change its sort of the character of its voice. Let's solo that out real quick. So this one isn't in all the time. It's kind of crackling in and out. And as you can hear, the operators are being modulated to create sort of white noise. Kind of wanted it to blend a little bit with the other patches. And then lastly, we have sort of a more traditional, just a square wave kind of a sound. And so everything all together. And I'm using a sustain pedal down there to hold out some of these notes. Next we have Slo Pad, which is pretty much what it sounds like. So it's a nice, slowly attacking pad with some delay and pitch modulation. The assignable switches and the super knob are primarily used for sort of delay modulation, or delay changes, to feedback and delay time. And next we have Squibbles, which is just kind of a silly, spacey patch. But you can do also some delay stuff. And last but not least, we have Dual Wield, which is a split patch that has a sort of space trumpet kind of sound on the right and just a bass sound on the left. And Super Knob mostly changes timbre of each of the sounds. So that's left side. And it just, as you can hear, kind of very slightly changes the harmonic content. And assignable switch 1 changes this to a nice pad, so it goes from a mono sound with high attack, or a quick attack I should say, to a poly sound that's got a slow attack. And assignable switch 2 is just delay. And in addition to pitch mod, there's a little bit of reverb change with the mod wheel. So, I hope you enjoyed some part of that very long demonstration. I had a lot of fun putting those sounds together, so it was also really fun to kind of break it down and talk about what each part does and kind of how all the controls work. As I stressed in the last video, I'm still just scratching the surface of this synthesizer. I feel like a synthesis engine as deep as this is going to give back to me whatever I put into it in study, and I'm still getting a lot of new ideas from it. So I look forward to doing more of that. Stay tuned if you like that stuff. And if you have any other questions or comments about any of the patches I put together or any other topic, please put it in the comments below. And I guess I'll just go out with saying thank you so much to Yamaha for giving me this project and for being super cool to work with. I really enjoyed it, and I hope to get to do more with y'all. So thanks, and until next time.